and gentlemen, and all genders outside and in between. Welcome back to Thirsty Work, the all-new sex education podcast. Today we've got a special guest, the CEO of the Survivors Trust, FAY MAXTED. We're going to be talking about all of their wonderful work. It's Thirsty Work. Hello, you exquisite human beings, you beautiful individuals. How are you doing? Welcome on in. Welcome back to Thirsty Work, the wonderful podcast that I've been running for a fair while now, if I'm completely honest with you. How's it going, everyone? Valen Vain from the editing booth here. Before we crack into the episode with Faye, who is a phenomenal and glorious individual, and I hope you really enjoy the episode, I did want to give you all a bit of a heads up, a bit of a trigger warning, that with Faye being the CEO of the Survivors Trust, and with the Survivors Trust doing the work that they do, we do have discussions around the topics of rape and sexual abuse. There are no details within these topics themselves, but I know that the subjects can be quite triggering for people, so I thought I'd give you all a bit of a heads up before cracking on with the rest of the podcast, okay? Thanks, and I hope you enjoy. Well, friends, without any further ado, let me bring in the absolutely glorious FAY MAXTED. Hello, Faye. How are you doing? How's it going?
Hello there, Valen, and what a wonderful intro. That's amazing. It's great to be here, and thank you for this opportunity. It's not always I get the chance to speak like this about the Survivors Trust and what we do, so it's really, really good to have this chance.
Oh, no, it's absolutely my privilege because, I discovered the Survivors Trust a long time ago when I was trying to work out what I could do for the survivors of rape and sexual abuse, because being a man, there are limitations within that. And finding your charity, and I remember shaving my head for your charity, and then we did a charity stream as well.
Yeah.
And that was all very exciting. So this was great. This was fantastic. And that was actually when we first met, because I did the charity stream and you were like, can I come on? And I was like, what? The CEO wants to come onto my stream? What is this?
Well, it was all new to me and to us as well. So I just wanted to find out who's doing this for us, because it's great.
Oh, wow. Me and a variety of other wonderful individuals. But I love the work that the Survivors Trust do. But I already know about the work that the Survivors Trust do. So would you mind telling everybody what the Survivors Trust, who the Survivors Trust are, what they do in regards to the charity work that they do and stuff? That would be wonderful.
I will do, and thank you. So, there's been a lot in the news about rape and sexual violence, and this is our work. So the Survivors Trust is a national membership organisation, the specialist voluntary sector rape and sexual abuse support services. So we've got about 130 member agencies across the UK and Ireland. They're working with around about 100,000 victims and survivors each year. And that's all genders, all ages, which is it sounds like a staggering number, but it's actually a fraction of the number of people that we know need the service. Our agencies provide counselling or helplines, advocacy work. And what they hear from the people they work with is, you saved my life. This changed my life. So people go from a place of feeling ashamed or even guilty sometimes about what's happened to them, and feeling that they're not worth anything, no self-esteem, really serious mental health consequences from being sexually abused and sexually violated. And our member agencies go in there and treat people like people. They understand what the impact is. They know how to work in the best way, how to be most effective in the counselling and support. So it does change lives for the better.
It does,
So,
massively so.
Our member agencies are amazing, the work they do, and so dedicated. and so determined to help people. And so what the Survivors Trust does is we support the agencies. So we do run a helpline ourselves. We've got our own helpline, which is open to anyone who's been affected by rape or sexual abuse, including partners or family members, friends, or we get quite a lot of calls from professionals as well who are working with survivors and don't really know how to do that in the best way. So we get a lot of calls from other counsellors, from nurses, doctors. So a busy helpline, but a lot of our work is around supporting our member agencies. They have a constant battle to get enough money to do what they want to do. So it's, always with charities, it comes down to money, and it's, from our point of view, we hate talking about it. We just want to do the work.
Yeah.
But it's there, and these days, everybody's got that on their mind. I think, how to get more out of what you've already got.
Certainly at the moment, yeah, definitely, because the cost of living crisis and everything else that's going on, it's definitely at the forefront of the mind.
Exactly, and we've had some of our agencies have had to set up sort of hardship funds to help people pay for public transport to get the counselling, or to pay for train and bus fares so that they can actually get there and get the support they need. So prepared to do anything really that's going to help. A lot of what the Survivors Trust does is around making sure our agencies know about all the pots of funding that's out there. We work with government departments to raise awareness and to promote the need for funding streams to be made available and to be tackling, these issues, because a lot of our agencies have waiting lists. Some of them have closed their waiting lists. It's reached a point where if someone comes onto a waiting list and they've got to wait a year or 2 years, it's not fair on them, because they're in limbo in that time. And it gives a false impression that somebody's waiting for a service when it's going to be such a long time.
And also the process of that service is also quite lengthy. Like I know full well from personal experience, a very close friend of mine was in a very dark place, and the waiting list to get him some therapy was 3 years. And I was like, well, we can't do that. So we ended up raising money to get him therapy, and he's doing amazingly well now, but it's a lengthy process. It's not like, okay, suddenly you've hit that 2 years and now you're cured. It's you've hit that 2 years and now your journey really starts. Like
that's it. That's exactly it. And for someone who's going into counselling, they're unpacking a hell of a lot of emotional turmoil and all of the feelings associated with what's happened to them, and that can include feelings of being let down by everyone who should have protected them. People can be left in a very dark place. They feel the world has let them down. The world isn't safe. People aren't safe. And so it takes a long time to build that trust up, to work with someone, to convince them that actually there are people around who will want to help, they'll want to listen, they'll want to do the best. That takes time to build that trust up. You don't achieve that in a few sessions, or even sometimes a few months. And it's just needed, and the fact that recovery is possible is something that I'm so determined to get that message out there. It's not that someone's damaged and then they're damaged for life. There'll always be a hurt there. It's one thing that I'm aware of is that, you know, when you've experienced a trauma like sexual abuse or like rape, no matter what you do, you can't erase that. You can't get rid of it. But what you do is you patch it over and you put it in a different place when you think about it. And it's like I've used this analogy before. It's like a broken vase. You can glue it back together, and you know, you can still use it as a vase, but it won't quite look the same. It won't quite be the same. That's not to say it's not good.
No, there's
And
actually with that beautiful analogy of the vase. There's a beautiful Japanese practice which I now can't remember for the life of me, where they
yeah,
actually like take broken crockery and put it
yeah,
back together with gold, and it's like
yeah,
it's that idea of it was broken and now it's fixed,
yeah.
but it's still beautiful. It's still somebody in the chat has actually just put kintsugi,
Yes,
kintsugi.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and that practice I find absolutely exquisite because of that fact, because of the metaphor that comes with it,
yeah,
of the idea of there's no such thing as broken or damaged goods in
no,
the
no,
metaphorical sense. You have been through a horrific experience, you've been through a traumatic experience, but those pieces can be put back together and they can still be beautiful and they can still be worthwhile and they can still be valid and have value. And it's just so beautiful to see, you know.
I love the idea of the gold as well,
Mm.
because what that puts me in mind of is, you know, when sometimes survivors will say, I think the experience has made me more sensitive, it's made me more caring, it's given me a social conscience. And, you know, it's it's that feeling that actually it is adding gold, it's adding something too.
Mm.
So not only are you repairing something that was broken, but you're adding something beautiful to it as well.
Yeah, it's making the most out of a bad situation. The
Yeah,
situation is definitely bad. That can't be denied. If it could be
yeah,
avoided in any way, shape, or form, like societally, or if we could educate people a little bit better in the concepts of consent and things, like
yeah,
that would be wonderful. That would be great. But it's that importance of saying, look, this was a horrible situation. You've been
yeah,
through this, but it's okay, and it will be okay, and
yeah.
that's really really important. Yeah, I love that. I love that like analogy as well, is that whole dynamic. How did you actually get involved with the Survivors Trust?
Well, I I went back into this is a long story. I went back into
Sorry.
adult education. You know, my marriage had broken up, and I was bringing up a small children on my own. But I went back into adult education, and at university, I met someone who was volunteering already on a helpline for people who'd experienced rape or sexual abuse, and she said, I think you'd make a good volunteer. Come along and find out." And I hadn't told her that I had sexual abuse in my background, but you know, she'd done that thing that sometimes survivors do, and she'd just seen somebody and seen something in me that she recognised, and so I volunteered for the local rape and sexual abuse service in Rugby. And that was it. I mean, I've got to say, we did a whole bunch of training around the impact of sexual violence, how to support people. You know, even going into detail around, you know, how do you talk to someone when they're telling you something traumatic? How do you look after yourself? But what really I think shook me was in the training, looking at this whole list of the impact that sexual abuse can have. And I was ticking off all the things. I was ticking off, you know, the sort of depression, nightmares, anxiety, eating disorder. I'm thinking, no, I can tick mistrust of people, and I can tick so many of these. But what it did, it sort of hooked me into the work, and it lit a fire in me to help other people and other survivors who hadn't been able to find their way through, who um, hadn't had the opportunity to go to a specialist service. So that hooked me in, and I ended up staying with that charity. I eventually became the manager of the charity, and in that work, I started to realize, and we're talking about the sort of the mid-90s, and sometimes think that there are taboo subjects, and they're avoided. Well, back in the 90s, anything to do with sexual violence, with sexual abuse, just didn't exist. There was no funding for it. We used to, we used to look for funding for unpopular causes, because that was the only place we'd find any money.
Because this is a big thing, and I remember what it was like in the 90s. Because I was there for a part of it. There was I definitely remember that, like, anything to do with sex was taboo. It was taboo very much in the 80s, but very much so. And when something that everyone partakes in, like sex, is taboo, the darker side of that is even more taboo. So nobody talks about it. Nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to report it. The whole, I mean, realistically speaking, and speaking as a sex educator as well, I've been doing this for a fair few years now. Like, people are already, like, embarrassed about the topic, so they're going to be even more so about, like, situations. They don't want to talk about the topic. They don't want to talk about the situations they've been in. So they're definitely not wanting to talk about situations they've been put in that were against their consent.
No, exactly. And even further back than that, and I know a lot of survivors in the same situation as me. When I tried to tell my parents what had happened, they just shut off. They didn't hear it, couldn't hear it. And that left me then as a young teenager with nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
And so you hold it inside and carry it with you, but it impacts on all of your relationships, on how you see the world, how you see yourself in the world.
And you mentioned earlier about the guilt side of things. I'm
Yeah.
unfortunate. I say unfortunate. It's unfortunate that people that I know have been through it. I won't say it's unfortunate that I know them, because they're amazing people. But like, the guilt is always prevalent.
Yeah.
The idea of, what did I do to be in a situation like this? And it's
Yeah.
like, nothing.
Exactly. I spoke to one survivor, and she'd been abused by an adult when she was very small, and she said, it was all her fault. She'd been a dreadful child, and she said, I'll show you a photo to show you. It was how I used to dress. And she brought this photo in, and it was of a little girl in a dress with socks on and little shoes, and there was nothing in that photo, and yet she was distraught and eaten up by guilt, and thought there was something about her that had caused it. It's so sad when you come up against that level of guilt in someone, when rationally you know that they've got nothing to feel guilty about, and part of them needs to work that out, and that can take time.
Do you think that part of that is down to the way that society views rape and sexual assault, in the regards that we as a society are so self-blaming for the most innocent of things, like bumping into somebody, or like wearing the wrong shade of outfit or whatever? We blame ourselves for so much that something as horrific, for lack of a better word, and I don't think there is a better word, as sexual assault, like that ingrained thing of, oh, it must have been my fault. because who else's fault could it have been? And that's a societal standard that I think.
I think there are two things going on. I think one is, we all want to think we live in a safe world where it's okay to go out and to have a drink, that our homes are going to be a safe place. But what do we do if they aren't? So if we accept that the world isn't a safe place, that's pretty horrible. That means, constantly living in a state of terror that something nasty is going to happen. So what children do when they're faced with that choice is they will put the blame onto themselves, because if the problem is that they did something wrong, then maybe they can stop doing that and the world will still be a safe place.
Yeah.
So it serves a function to help people feel overall safer in the world, but it's really punishing and really cruel. And it feeds into the general victim blaming, because everyone else wants to think the world is a safe place as well. So if bad things happen to good people, that means it's not a safe world. So this is the basis of victim blaming is that bad things happen to bad people. So they must have been doing something wrong. They were drinking, they were wearing the wrong thing, out in the wrong place, doing things that they themselves feel they wouldn't do, so they would be safe.
Yeah, and there's also, I suppose, the fact that we're brought up, especially in this day and age, like historically. I did a big project years ago on like the fables and fairy tales, and historically fables and fairy tales were designed to teach a lesson, whereas nowadays fables and fairy tales paint a perfect world and how everything's going to be perfect and everything's okay and only bad things happen to bad people, and that whole dynamic gets drilled into us at such a young age that the concept of the fact that the world is unfair and that bad things happen because of bad people, not to bad people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, you made me think about the Brothers Grimm, because fairy stories usually were pretty awful, weren't
they? They were vile. They were horrible.
Scary, yeah. And in reality, for I don't know, 1 in 4 children, one in 4 girls, 1 in 6 boys, maybe, it really is a horrible world.
Yeah. I mean, I looked up earlier the statistics just to update myself on them, because I know that I remember the last time when we did that charity stream for the Survivors Trust, I looked them all up to make sure that I had all my facts right and what have you. But then I'm aware that obviously with the pandemic hitting, there was a massive spree of date rape straight afterwards, because no one was allowed out, and then everyone went out and got too hammered, or they were like, people went out specifically to drug people, which is, it churns my stomach to think about it, but it did happen. The statistics are horrific. The statistics are, and it has to be said as well, the statistics are only the reported cases.
Exactly, and still the vast majority of the victims don't report. So something like 80% or so, at least, maybe more than that, don't report and never report. I think the other impact of the pandemic and the lockdowns was that some people were trapped at home with the abuser. And I think we'll be seeing the impact of that for a few years.
I think so too,
Maybe longer, yeah. With people coming forward eventually when it's safe, or when they feel safe too.
I know that there was a big thing with when they brought out the emergency alarms. When the emergency alarm was meant to sound off on people's phone, and there was a big thing being like, if you are the victim of domestic violence and you have a secret phone, make sure your phone is turned off during that time, because they'll find out. They will find out. It'll go off whether we like it or not. And that whole scenario, like, it was one of those things, and I'm forever learning this whole dynamic of it. Like, you're not aware of something until you're aware of it. Like, and that was never even considered it. Somebody said it, and I was like, oh my God, like the penny drop moment
Yeah,
of this is horrible. How could somebody not have thought of that? But then I think
yeah.
I didn't think of it. So, just
Well,
wow.
and why would you?
Mm,
Why would you think of that? It's not unless you're in a situation sometimes until it becomes apparent. All the different nuances and different issues. And for someone who's trying to escape a relationship, then that can be a really dangerous time. I think it's more dangerous than any other time, really, in that relationship when someone's making that break for freedom.
yeah.
So yeah, to have their phone, which is maybe a phone that's going to get them some help, if they need it quickly. Yeah, to have that discovered.
It's that
Um,
lifeline, isn't it? And
yeah,
like you say, the most dangerous time is when somebody's preparing to leave, because
yeah,
that's the point where they are, like, there's always, first of all, their own paranoia of being discovered makes them
yeah,
act differently, which puts the abuser on edge. That whole dynamic then just the tension builds,
yeah.
and
Mm.
that's when it's most volatile.
Mm.
And most scary for the like survivor of that abuse, just
Um,
to go through that. Oh, yeah, just
Well, I think as well in that relationship, the fear of losing this person that they've had total control over,
yeah.
yeah, drives that anger and that fear in them that makes them lash out. Um, yeah, very very dangerous time.
No, most certainly. In regards to like obviously, this is, you were saying at the beginning that this was the first time you've done similar sort of thing, or you've done similar sort of things to this, but this is slightly different. Have
Yeah,
you seen? Because as a sex educator, I have seen massive changes from when I was a kid learning about sex. And then with the ingress of influencers and Instagram and all these different social medias, like the talking about sex and the openness
yeah,
about sex and the fact that a beautiful person doesn't have to be a fashion model, that
yeah.
that entire body confidence, sex positive environment has massively exploded. Have you, in the Survivors Trust, seen like benefits from that? Do you think it's got better? Do you think it's got worse?
Um, I'm I'm going to say is probably a bit of both. So I think there is more of an openness and there is more focus on awareness and raising awareness of what to do or where you can get help. Um, but on the other hand, I think there's been, a huge increase in online facilitated sexual abuse, for example, and sexual exploitation.
Of
So,
course, yeah.
and we've got new ways of sexually exploiting and abusing people. So, I see that as a real problem. So, on the one hand, there is more openness about it, but on the other, there's arguably more ways of offending and harming people, and people are still vulnerable.
And I suppose
Um,
that realistically, like I'm aware as well, being in the world of social media, that the laws are slow to catch up with
yeah,
the needs of the internet.
yeah,
So I can imagine that becomes, because I know that it's only relatively recently that stuff like revenge porn has become
yes,
illegal,
yeah, yeah,
because and because why would anyone think about making that illegal? And it's like, well, this is the day and age of the internet. You are having people are having
yeah,
their images displayed without consent, and it's causing all
exactly,
kinds of problems.
yeah, yeah. And there's always been sort of images taken back in the old days with cameras, and now those images get uploaded online.
Yeah,
So someone, who had photos taken years ago still has that thought that those images are out there and being used by abusers and paedophiles. And that's hugely distressing,
yeah.
because it's like an ongoing injury to them. And the laws haven't kept up and the compensation scheme hasn't kept up. So that's one of the things that we've been asking for, to change the guidelines and the rules around claiming criminal injuries compensation to take account of these new offences that, they're not necessarily violent acts, but they injure and they harm people.
Yeah.
So we'd like to see that change made. That was one of the things that the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse called for, was the criminal injuries to be sort of re-looked at to make sure it was fit for purpose.
That's really good. I remember, I don't know whether it's changed since I last looked it up, but I remember like how badly my stomach turned when I found out that like the sentence for rape and sexual abuse was like 5 years, and I was like,
Yeah.
you can get much worse for theft. And I'm like,
Yeah.
you're literally going out of your way to destroy somebody's life, and
Yeah.
you are not, and you're getting 5 years.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's mind blowing. Now, with life experience and understanding and meeting so many different people from different walks of life, I'm very much more of an idea of rehabilitation over punishment. But it's still the idea that somebody can get 5 years of rehabilitation, 5 years of going to see a therapist and find out understand the reason why what they did was wrong and how horrific it is, and that entire dynamic is still not very long. It's still and that's if the system was perfect and well funded, which it definitely isn't.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. There are people out there who've got, they may have inappropriate thoughts around children and be really horrified at themselves. And the help absolutely needs to be there, because otherwise, you don't know what pathway that person's going to follow. So I totally support rehabilitation, working with offenders or people who are at risk of offending. We have to do that. We have to put the investment into that as well. That's preventive work. I also think there are some people who are beyond rehabilitation, and I would like to see them locked up for a long time.
Most certainly.
I have to say, the people who, with the best will in the world, they are not going to change. They are thoroughly nasty.
There are people out there that are stuck in their ways because they refuse to be any other way, in the most innocent of ways, in regards to, like, I don't know, political value or the fact that they're misogynistic or whatever the scenario. And those are, I'm not going to say better, but I will say that they are like more socially acceptable, in the regards that like society is going to overlook a misogynistic comment, whereas with something like this, it's far worse. It's far worse. And you're right, there are people out there that will just be stuck in their ways for the sake of being stuck in their ways. They do not want to learn any differently. They do not want to change, and those people should be locked up for the good of society. Really, they should be taken. They should have that element, the risk, the threat to society taken away, because like you say, they're dangerous. But
and I think it's the assessment of the harm that can be caused. Because it really, without the right kind of help, it can be really life destroying. You're talking about your friend earlier being in a dark place, and some people don't come back from that.
Unfortunately not, no. I'm unfortunately all too aware of that side of things. All too aware of that side of things. But you're right in the regards that it needs to be. And this is, I think, one of the major problems that we as a society have, but I don't know how to fix it. And I'm definitely not the best person to even try. But it's one of those situations where I remember, like, being a younger man, finding out about sex, finding out about rape and sexual abuse, and being horrified. But my anger was always, like, all of my emotion towards the concept of rape was against the perpetrator. And I never once, especially as a younger person, I never once thought about the survivor. And it was only it was only afterwards that I started, and I remember it very clearly. It was a project that somebody was, a agency I used to work for was like, "Hey, Valen, do you know anybody, any female actors that would be up for going and working with survivors of rape and sexual abuse?" And I was like, "I would do it. Give it to me." And they were like, "Yeah, you can't, because unfortunately the scenario and the situation there is that you're a man, and they're in a delicate position at this moment, and they've specifically asked for women performers." And I was like, that hit me so hard, the idea that I wasn't able to help when I was so keen to. And
that's really sad, Valen, because men absolutely can help and can be counselors and can be advocates. And I think you're right. There are some women who would struggle to work with a male worker, but there are others who wouldn't. Others who really want to see a man who's positive and supportive. And we shouldn't forget that. We really shouldn't forget that the overwhelming vast majority of men are not offenders. They're regular, kind people.
Yeah. Oh, most certainly. Most certainly. And it's also keen to say, I as a cisgendered man myself, I'm very keen to say, but it's also our responsibility to hold other people's sexist comments, their misogynistic comments, their potentially sexually assault charged comments, hold them accountable for those things. Somebody says something inappropriate, call them out on it.
Yeah.
And
exactly. And I think it's a really difficult area sometimes for men. I'm thinking about, running some training yesterday, and we had a room full of 20 people, 18 women, 2 men. And, most of the way through the day. And then suddenly one guy said, I feel a bit uncomfortable here. He said, I'm just so aware that, most of these offences are committed by men. I'm feeling bad for being a man. And I thought that was really sad, because it's the minority who are causing the problems. And we had a talk about that, and I think he felt okay afterwards. But it really brought home how difficult it is to hear, that that if you're a man yourself and you're hearing about what other men do,
there's definitely a weight there, and there's definitely a sense of that, because of our similarities, even if those similarities are merely in what genitalia we have, or I'm not going to try and harsh down on any other genders that also have penises. I'm opening it up to everybody. Like, if you share something with somebody who has done something so horrific, you feel that weight. You feel that weight. And you can either, in my experience anyway, you can either sit with the weight till it makes you uncomfortable, or you can use that to fuel your ability to stand up against it. And this is what I have done, because in my teenage years, I was definitely the other way around. I was like, oh my God, I hate men because I am one, and they do such horrific things. And it was an interesting period of my life where I changed that thought process to, no, I am a man, but I am not responsible for their actions. But I can use this feeling, these emotions I have, to fuel me to push back against that behavior, to help educate people that is not okay, to help educate people that the innocent joke that you think is really funny actually makes somebody really uncomfortable, and that's not okay. Like, it is that kind of scenario. And I mean, I'm also have a horrifically bad justice complex, and every single time this conversation always gets me really fired up, but it's such an important conversation to have,
It's culture changing, and that's what we need. And, we need to stand together with it. And like you say, call it out and challenge it, because that's how you start to shift perceptions. And, that can be done. It takes time. It takes time, like so many things that are worthwhile do. But it can be done. And I think what you do is part of that culture change. It's great.
Well, thank you very much. Flattery gets you everywhere. Now that is, it's really. Do you know what? It means a lot coming from you, because of the work that you do, and the fact that is so close to my heart. Because I mean, I am well and true. Somebody described me earlier today as a sex enthusiast, and I was like, I appreciate that. And the whole dynamic of the fact that I am so passionate about sex. I'm so passionate about eroticism and sex and all the dynamics and all the different elements. And this feels like this entire subject, as soon as it comes to a breach of consent, it just sullies everything that I hold dear. And I think that's probably why I get so worked up about it,
Well,
but
sex should be good. Sex should be wonderful and consensual. And when it's not, it spoils that. It spoils that experience. And, it's something that survivors can struggle with, that intimacy afterwards and having, the memories sort of intruding into the present day. That's one of the most damaging things. And yet, have absolutely every right to a joyful sex life as much as anyone else.
Oh, 100%. And I think is that something that the Survivors Trust get involved with in regards to their the help? Because obviously you provide help on so many different levels to so many different agencies across the country. Is it something that you get involved in helping people in that next step? Like, there's the first step of the counseling of getting over the incident itself, and then there's the next step of being like, it's okay to go back and enjoy these things.
Yeah, I mean, we don't specifically do that, but we certainly we certainly support that. We collaborated with survivors to write a website, support website. And part of that was around intimacy, because, survivors need to have almost that permission. It's okay. It's okay for you to enjoy your body. Whatever someone else did, that wasn't you. You can make choices now. And so there is a specific section on that website, which is not detailed. We had to be mindful about who might access it, but definitely the basis of it is, you have a right to enjoy your life and enjoy intimacy with your partner, and it's your right, and you should have that.
And I think it's also worth stating as well, like the further step from that if you are a partner who has been with somebody who has been sexually abused, either historically or relatively recently, patience and creating that safe environment, to be like, do you know what, it's okay to have a breakdown. It's okay that the mood was taken away from us. It's okay that you were absolutely there for 1 minute and then suddenly you're not. And it's the patience and working through it and taking it really slowly and just being like, okay, let's see where you're comfortable. And if there's any point, and I think one element that I'm very, very well aware of due to my sexual experiences with people who have been unfortunately through that, the importance of making sure that person doesn't feel any guilt for a trauma response they can't control.
Yeah.
And that's always been really important to me, of just being like, it's okay. It's all right.
Yeah. And I think that, when you talk about trauma responses, if that's a panic attack or a flashback, then, that's going to really impact on that person. Well, both that person and their partner, that's going to be difficult to work through, but it can be done. And like you say, it takes patience. That's all.
It does. It does. But on the other side of things, and this is something that I, again, on that dynamic of patience and understanding and respect, mutual respect, there's also a really nice silver lining. I'm one of these people that loves silver linings. The silver lining is that you are taking the time to heal with them, and you are also learning a deep, intimate connection with each other. And that will, as much as it might be hard and frustrating at times, the connection and the trust that you will build up with that person, it will be second to none. Be second to none. And I think it's really important to say that it's not all just patience and frustration and stuff like that. There's so much more to it. Yeah,
that's it. And I think you're right. The value of that trusting relationship, and taking the time to develop that and to cherish that. Yeah,
that's really good. That's really, really good. Have your perspectives changed, like, with your work over the past 20 years?
In what way, Valen? What
in the regards that do you think that the perspectives that you came into the Survivors Trust with have changed in this day and age in regards to all of the work that you do, and the your personal perspective, your personal core values, etc.?
I think my core values have stayed the same. I think I've always wanted to promote empowerment, survivor empowerment, awareness, education. I think that's one of the best gifts you can give someone is information about their trauma responses, what's happened to them, prevalence, the fact that it wasn't their fault. If that means talking about offender behavior and how offenders can manipulate people around them. So I've always felt that that's important. I think when I first started working at Survivors Trust, it felt like we would take 2 steps forward and 2 back, and it felt like we'd make a bit of progress and raise awareness, and then it would suddenly fall back again. And I think we're still in the same place. It still feels like some of the same battles are being played out. And I know that there are big efforts being made. For example, with the police, they have a huge project running at the moment called Operation Bluestone Soteria, and it's about improving the police response to victims and survivors. And it's fantastic. I'm so glad they're doing it. But it's against a backdrop of, the vast majority of reported rapes never end up in court. So many are just go by the wayside. So we have a system that really doesn't work for victims. We've got an adversarial court system where what the defence barrister does is try to almost blacken the name of the victim and the reputation of the victim, insinuate that they're not trustworthy or they had another motive for making the allegation. So it feels like the whole system needs to be changed, and that is a battle to keep going back into the same meetings and with the same organizations and saying things need to change, and yet they haven't changed enough yet. And yet that's not to dismiss and certainly not to disparage all the effort that's going into it, because there is fantastic work going on and it's brilliant to see that. It's just that as a survivor, I want it to be better. It can be better, and we should be doing more.
Do you find that it changes depending on, like, who, for lack of a better terminology, like, who has the power of say? because obviously that changes in regards to governments, that changes in regards to local councils and provinces and what have you, and they all have their own agendas as well. They all have their own friends, and it's that pushing the dynamic, pushing constantly against something, finally getting somewhere, and then having the rug pulled from under you like a year or two later because somebody new's in power that has a different agenda.
There's always that risk, and I think one of the things that I've come to realize is that what you need to do is work with the people who've got their hearts in it, and you can tell the people who are interested and engaged. You can tell the ministers and the MPs and the officials and people working in organisations like the CPS, Crown Prosecution Service, or in the police, and you can tell the ones who've got their heart there, and maybe they know people themselves, maybe they've even got their own experiences sometimes, but they're the ones that you work with, they're the ones that you seek out. And when you do that, it doesn't really matter who's in power, because you're working on that level of personal understanding and involvement. And I think sometimes it's not unless you've known somebody or experienced something yourself that you really understand what it means. And if you don't understand that, it's all a mystery. And I think a lot of people, if they've never had trauma in their lives, don't understand what the long-term impact can be, don't understand why people 20 or 30 years later will say, that they're still getting flashbacks, or, it's still bothering them. Because they, for most people, if something happens, it's in the past. It's just that this is a very different kind of experience, and it affects memory, and it affects emotions and our whole body in a very different way.
Oh, definitely. And I suppose that's where you've got the two levels, the two levels of the side of it. You've got like the for lack of a better word, the higher level, where you're speaking to the politicians, speaking to the police officers, you're speaking to the people in charge that you're trying to convince about the work that you're doing, that it's worth financing, that it's worth supporting. And then you've got the more intimate ground level of working with the actual survivors and seeing their progress and seeing them like really come out of that horrible situation. And that's the rewarding bit. And the top levels, like the frustrating bit, where it's just, well, mostly frustrating. I'm sure there are plenty of really amazing opportunities and amazing people that you've met, but that level of the rewarding bit is seeing these people get better in themselves after the scenario, and then you've got the give us money because it's a worthwhile cause. God damn it! Like
that's it.
That is amazing. That is amazing. Well, just before we do anything else, this is the 20th birthday of the Survivors Trust this year. Is that right?
It is. That's right. We registered we'd already been meeting, but we formally registered as a charity in May 2003. So somehow it's 2 decades later, and we're still going strong. We're still doing the same thing, and in fact, getting stronger than ever. And we do get a hell of a lot of support, and a lot of survivors, wanting to do things, and that is just brilliant. So we're working on plans to, just to promote out there. It's really difficult because this is such a tough subject to work with. How do you say we're going to have a celebration? It's like,
I mean, I'm all too aware, because like as a sex educator, like I've got my face printed on condoms as my business card. Do you know what I mean? Like I was like, this will be fun, but as a result, there's so many companies that are just like, no, we can't work with you. No, we can't work with you because it's sex, and they don't want their company associated with sex. And I can only imagine that you have similar scenarios in your scenario, in your situation, where you're going to companies being like, "Hey, we're gonna have a bit of a celebration. It's a dark thing, but we're celebrating the fact we've been helping people for 20 years." That's
Yeah,
what you're celebrating, not the fact that
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
it's unfortunate that the charity is even needed in the first place, but the fact of the matter is, it is, and you're
yeah,
celebrating that you have spent 20 years helping the survivors, regardless of gender, helping the survivors
yeah.
and their families get through those difficult times.
That's it.
And
That's
that's so
absolutely it.
amazing. What are you doing to celebrate? Come on, tell me.
Well, we're planning we're planning things throughout the year. We're hoping to do some, and I will be contacting you again, Valen,
Ooh,
some podcasts and videos and
oh, how
things.
exciting.
Which we've minimal experience in doing stuff like that. We're certainly planning a conference for next May, so we're planning things throughout the months or throughout this year, and then culminating in a conference next May, which will be our 21st birthday, and yeah, wanting to make the most out of it, I guess, and just
Good.
have the whole year of things to do. So some of it will be maybe fundraising events where we're looking for quirky ideas of things to do, and wanting to really get the message out there that support is there. Even if it takes a while to get to it, even if there is a waiting list, it will make the difference, and it's worth it. And just fighting for that change. We've got a victims and prisoners bill currently going through Parliament. We're hoping that that's going to make a difference for victims' rights.
Fantastic.
Wanting to bring survivors together to comment on that. We run survivors forums, and if anyone's interested in any of our forums, then go through our website and just let us know. It's really important to us that survivors are there saying what they need, saying what their experiences are. And so, yeah, we'll be doing a whole variety of things throughout the year, and we'll just keep battering on the doors like we have been doing for two decades.
That's amazing. That's so amazing. And by all means, you're saying you wanted to contact me. If there's quirky ideas, I can definitely do those.
For sure.
That is absolutely fantastic. That's amazing. We have had one question from the chat, which is, what are your thoughts about current sex education in schools regarding consent and awareness of sexual abuse, and how would you like to see them evolve in the future?
Yeah. I think it's useful to have education about consent, but I'm really aware that for many children in school, by the time those consent workshops come around, it's too late. So, in terms of childhood sexual abuse, for example, I'm much more in favour of talking to children, not going in and talking to young children about sexual violence and rape, but talking about in the integrity of their own bodies, and talking about what to do if they feel uncomfortable. I sometimes think that consent places almost a burden too much on boys and young men, and I think it can be a really confusing time. I think it's something that needs to be developed in a slightly different way. And also just aware that there are significant numbers of boys and young men who are victims themselves. I think for me, the way consent is delivered in school, it should be from an external specialist agency. I think there should be scope for any kids who've got any issues to confidentially talk to someone and to have that support available. And yeah, like I say, I would be talking much sooner. And whilst I think consent is valuable, I think it's more important for everyone to be informed.
Yeah.
I think at the moment the internet has created so many problems for kids and for young people. I was at a conference the other week where we were hearing about access to online pornography, and it's between the ages of 7 and 11, up to 70% of kids will have seen not just mild pornography, but the most severe kind. So we need to be thinking about that too.
Yeah.
And in that context, I think consent gets a bit weird. I think there's been almost a blurring of what's natural and acceptable and normal for people to have choice around, and not to feel that they have to consent to everything.
Yeah, and I think there's also the dynamic of the fact that, unfortunately, as I have found out through a lot of the work that I do, a lot of children are learning sex education from pornography.
Yeah.
There was a thing a while ago, statistics that came out, which I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was saying that there was a large percentage of young teenagers who believed that sex always ended with a man coming on the woman's face. And it was just like that was just their view of that. That's what it happens because that's what they do in the porn films. So that must be the case. And it's like, unfortunately, I think it's a constant battle with antiquated values of the idea that no, you can't teach children about sex because they need to be young and they need to be pure. And it's like, yeah, they allow them to be young and pure, but let them be aware of what the world is like. Let them be aware of the fact that there's some nasty people out there. Let them be aware of consent. Let them be aware of these things so they can make their own decisions and be aware of the dangers that are out there for them, I've actually... Oh, no?
Yeah, I was going to say, we need to be teaching kids how to respect and value themselves, and so that they do make choices and that they're happy and comfortable with what's happening.
Yeah, no, completely and utterly, completely agree. We've actually had another question that's just come in as well. I would like to know how your help actually looks like, or what the help actually looks like. Is it group therapy similar to AA, or are they also helping with legal stuff and that kind of things?
Oh, so I mean, it's a whole range of different things. So, there is group therapy available, or peer support groups. Lots of agencies provide one-to-one counselling, either these days online sometimes, or face-to-face on the phone, and lots of other different services too. So play therapy for kids, but we've got a whole list of the different kinds of therapies that our agencies provide. So some are providing equine therapy, or they'll have therapy dogs too. A whole range of different things. Sometimes it's a specific kind of interventions like EMDR, eye movement desensitization, or it's person-centered counselling. Also advocacies, so independent sexual violence advisors who will support someone and it's across anything, any aspect, whether it's education, work, benefits, or if they're involved in a court case, then supporting them through that, through sometimes even appearing in court with them. So a whole range of different things, usually tailored to what's needed, and provided as in the best way, the most effective way for someone.
That's I think that's, for me, one of the things that I love most about the Survivors Trust is the fact that it's not just a one size fits all scenario. It's literally like, this requires a certain type of therapy. This requires a certain type of support. This family need a bit more support for these things. You literally tailor it as needed, or as best as you possibly can, given the limitations that all charities and what have you have. But you tailor it per survivor and survivor's family if need be, etc. Like that's really amazing, to be honest with you. That's amazing. Well, thank you so much, Faye. Thank you so much for joining me and agreeing to this. I really, really appreciate it. It's been amazing. So before we end, can you tell us where people can find the Survivors Trust, please?
Yes, if you go to the survivorstrust.org, you'll find us. There's a contact form on the page. There's also links to our TST Survivor Resources website, which has got a whole load of information. You know, we ask survivors, what do you need on this website? What do you want to see? And you know, they wanted everything. They wanted information. They wanted the science behind trauma responses. They wanted all the subjects covered for all the areas of their lives that they felt had been impacted. So have a look at that too. And on our website, you'll see there is a helpline. And if anyone wants more information or just wants to chat, then please call that too.
That's amazing. That's absolutely fantastic. And for those people that are watching the VOD on YouTube or listening to the podcast on one of the many podcast sites, I will put all of the links down below in the description so that everyone can easily find these amazing resources to this amazing charity, because I've loved it. I've had a wonderful time, and maybe one day everyone will see pictures of me with absolutely no hair, because that happened. I looked like Richard O'Brien from the Crystal Maze. It was an interesting part of my life, you know.